All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to trace a single idea, just one, that for the last 500 years has sparked revolutions, reshaped entire empires, and completely transformed the globe.
And this is it. This powerful thought is really the engine of our whole story. It's this idea of a faith that is never standing still, one that's defined by constant, dynamic change.
And when we say it reshaped the world, we are not exaggerating. This continuous process of reform has kicked off wars, brought down empires, inspired some of the most timeless art we have, and it has fundamentally shaped the way billions of people see the world today.
So, how in the world do we make sense of all that? It's a lot, right? Well, let's use an analogy to guide us through this whole story. I want you to think of the history of the church as a great, powerful river.
For its first 1,000 years or so, Christianity was exactly that. One single, mighty river. Just this one massive current flowing right through European history. But as the 1500s rolled around, you could feel the pressure starting to build. There were new ideas in the air, incredible new technologies like the printing press, and this growing hunger for reform. It was all starting to cause these little cracks in the riverbank.
And then, the crack gave way. In this huge moment that we now call the Protestant Reformation, our single river dramatically and permanently forks into two.
That is the big question, isn't it? What could possibly be powerful enough to divert a river that had flowed in the same direction for over 1,000 years?
Well, at its heart, the Reformation wasn't actually meant to start a whole new church. The goal was to reform the existing one. It was a protest, which, is right there in the name, Protestantism. And it was a call to get back to what the Reformers saw as the true core of the faith.
This whole complex debate really boils down to two crucial points. First, authority. The Catholic Church taught that authority comes from Scripture and church tradition together. The Reformers pushed back with sola scriptura, Scripture alone. The second point was salvation. Was it achieved through a combination of faith and good works, or was it by sola fide, faith alone? These two ideas were basically the theological earthquake that caused the
But don't think for a second that the original river just stopped flowing. No way. It responded with a massive surge of its own energy, its own powerful current of reform.
This was the Counter-Reformation. It involved getting really clear on core doctrines at the Council of Trent, cleaning up internal corruption, and, this is absolutely crucial, launching one of the biggest global missionary expansions in history, especially with new orders like the Jesuits leading the charge.
Now, that initial fork in the river, that was just the beginning. The new Protestant current very quickly started splitting into countless smaller streams, and each one had its own distinct character.
So, let's look at the timeline. It all ignites with Luther in 1517. The Catholic response really kicks into gear in 1545. By the 1600s, you have distinct groups like Lutherans, Calvinists, and Anglicans all taking root. Then you hit the 1700s, and these huge waves of spiritual energy called the Great Awakenings sweep across Europe and America, with a big focus on personal conversion, and that creates even more new movements.
This whole process of branching out created what we now call denominationalism, and it fits our river analogy perfectly, right? Each denomination is like its own unique stream. They all flow from the same source, but they each navigate the landscape a little differently, with their own unique practices and interpretations.
So now, our river, with all its branching streams, flows into the 18th and 19th centuries. And here, the landscape itself changes dramatically. We're talking about the rise of science, reason, secularism, the Enlightenment. This presented a whole new set of challenges.
And this new landscape created another major fork. On one side, you have liberal theology, which tried to adapt and reconcile faith with all this modern thinking, and in direct response, you have fundamentalism, which rose up to defend what it saw as the non-negotiable, fundamental truths of the faith, especially by upholding the literal truth of the Bible.
Now, with the rise of secularism, especially in Europe and North America, a new story started to take hold. The idea was that the river of faith, after flowing for so many centuries, was finally starting to slow down, maybe even evaporate in the heat of modernity.
But was that what was really happening? Was the story of Christianity in the modern world simply one of decline?
Not even close. What looked like the river drying up in one part of the world was actually a colossal, world-changing shift. The river wasn't disappearing. It was flooding into new continents with incredible force. Just look at these numbers. In 1910, 85% of all Christians lived in Europe and North America. But today, the numbers have dramatically flipped. A staggering 2/3 of the world's Christians now live in the global south, in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. This is the result of centuries of missionary work and the explosion of vibrant, local forms of Christianity. It is arguably the biggest geographic shift in the faith's entire history.
So where does all of this leave us? Well, today, that one great river, after forking and branching for 500 years, isn't really just a river anymore. It has flowed into a vast global ocean of faith that's incredibly diverse and all interconnected.
So why does this journey matter? Well, for one, it helps us understand the roots of all the diverse Christian traditions we see today. It shows a long history of adaptation and renewal. And by tracing all these streams back to one river, it reminds us of a common source, which can encourage unity. But maybe most importantly, it gives us a truly global perspective on a faith that is more vibrant than ever.
This isn't just an abstract history lesson. The currents of the Reformation, the Counter-Reformation, the Great Awakenings, that huge global shift, these are the very currents that have shaped the world we are all living in right now.
And that brings us to our final question. The river is always reforming, always moving. So when you look at the world today, at technology, globalization, and all the new cultural challenges, we're left to wonder, what new channels is it going to carve out? And what will shape its course tomorrow?